Signor Sindaco de Blasio, signore e signori, care amiche e amici, benvenuti, welcome to New York University. Mr. Mayor, it is a particularly honor for me to welcome you back to your alma mater. At this point, you're normally invited to turn off your phones and electronic devices. On the contrary, I'm asking you to turn them on and to connect on our NYU Wi-Fi using all the information you find on the screen. I'll have a few homework for you later on. My name is Stefano Albertini, and I'm the director of Casa Italiana Zerilli-Marimò, the Italian Cultural Center at NYU. If you don't know us already, and after almost 25 years of activity, that would be a shame, visit us at 24 West 12th Street or online at the address you see up there. We offer more than 100 events per academic year, all free and open to the public, ranging from conferences to concerts, from art exhibits to film screenings. We also host a book club, a film club, and are proud to have both an opera company and a theater company in residence. I'm sure each of you will find something interesting, thought-provoking, and fun to do at the Casa. But first and foremost, Casa is home to the Department of Italian Studies at NYU, the largest and, according to the Chronicles of Higher Education, most prestigious Italian department in the US. It was the first department of Italian to have an endowed visiting professorship in Italian-American studies. Thanks to the foundation of the Tiro Segno Club, the oldest Italian-American club in the US, our students have a chance to study in depth all aspects of the Italian-American experience, from literature to cinema, from politics to material culture. The course, currently taught by Professor Josephine Gattuso-Hendon, sees the enthusiastic participation of students of all ethnic and national backgrounds, proving that Italian-American culture is not something that concerns only Italian-Americans. I had the fortune to see the whole documentary that we are seeing, of which we are seeing a preview tonight, The Italian Americans, last spring at a private screening organized by my friend Anthony Tamburri, the Dean of the Calandra Institute at CUNY. And at that time, I promised John Maggio and Maria Laurino that Casa Italiana and myself would do anything we could to promote the documentary as much as we could. I hope with this event, I'm keeping my word. And here is your homework. Each of you should tweet, Instagram, and Facebook all your friends where you are right now and what you're about to do. Especially invite them to tune in to their public television station on February 17th and 24th to see the entire documentary. And now, please welcome the President and CEO of WNET, Neal Shapiro. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here for tonight's celebration of all things Italian-American. As home to the largest Italian-American community in the United States, we're privileged to welcome you to tonight's preview of PBS's The Italian-Americans and our companion film, Italian-Americans of New York and New Jersey. I want to give a special shout out to the remarkable Gay Talese, I think one of our generation's most brilliant writers. You're going to see him on the panel tonight. There we go. And to our great mayor who let me into Gracie Mansion to interview him, and he's also on our film. So, Mr. Mayor, welcome. And I want to thank our host for this evening, PBS station WETA, or as we call it in the PBS system, WETA, who produced the national film, and Casa Italiana at New York University. You know, I was preparing for what I wanted to say tonight. I tried to think about what the tri-state area might be like without any Italian-American influence, without our Italian-American brothers and sisters, and it's a pretty sorry state. No cannoli, no gelato, no ravioli, no Bennett, no Sinatra, no Valli, no Lucci or Bartiromo or Tucci, no LaGuardia, Como, D'Amato or de Blasio, and most unimaginable for me as a Yankee fan, no DiMaggio. But as you'll see in tonight's preview in our two-part Italian-Americans of New York and New Jersey, the contributions of Italian-Americans are vast and important to our community. And like so many immigrant communities, they suffered and prevailed over prejudice and discrimination. It's a story at once very familiar and very unique, and we're privileged to tell it on all our stations, 13 WLIW and NJTV. Sharing these stories of our community, its history, its people, its perseverance, are a critical part of our contribution to the tri-state area, a contribution that wouldn't be possible without the support of many of you. In fact, when we say viewers like you, we mean it. And I would say one more thing, there are only two kinds of people when it comes to Channel 13, the people who support 13 and people who are about to support 13. But now let's watch a short clip from the upcoming Italian Americans of New York and New Jersey, which will air on the 17th and the 24th at 8 p.m., just prior to the PBS program, The Italian Americans. Let's take a look. And I want to say several of our funders are here. I want to thank them for helping make this documentary possible. I hope you'll all tune in. I'd now like to introduce Bro Adams, chairman of the National Endowment for the Humanities and a longtime champion of the study of the humanities, most recently during 15 years as president of Colby College. In 2014, Bro took the helm of the NEH, an organization that has been a vital and constant supporter of public media and projects like the Italian Americans that raise awareness of the contributions people make from all corners of the world. Bro, please come on up.
Thank you, Neal, and good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for coming. I'd like to offer some very specific thanks to Mayor de Blasio for being here tonight. He also made my night by saying that NEH was beloved in New York. So thank you for that. It's wonderful to hear. Of course, Jeff Bieber, the producer of this wonderful film from WETA, and John Maggio, its director, and Maria Laurino, who's written the wonderful companion book to the project, and to all of the NEH staff who worked so hard in helping our funding come together with this film, particularly Karen Middleman and her colleagues in public programs. We are enormously proud to be associated with this film for three basic reasons. First, and most obviously, this is just a wonderful story, and it's told by John in the most wonderful and rich detail. It's a great piece of ethnography and a wonderful representation of this tremendously important community, and rich in all of the detail that you will see in part tonight and then in great part when the film airs on PBS. But of course, beyond its richness and its detail, it's also a story about the struggle and the pain of assimilation, which was not an easy story. And I think you'll see a little bit tonight and more broadly when you view the whole film, the power of that story and the emotion of that story. So in itself, about the Italian-American community, this is a wonderful piece of work. But it's a story not just about the Italian-American community, it's also a national story, because after all, we are the people, the United States of America, that is composed of these stories. This is in part the national narrative of the creation of the Republic out of many different people's stories. I was reminded, as I was thinking about this, of the wonderful words over the visitor center to the Capitol in Washington, out of many one. And that is, of course, the story of the United States of America. And it is why Lincoln was moved to say that we are a republic, not of national origins or specific ethnicity, but we are a republic of principles in which all of these different stories come together. So this film is in part an answer, I think, to the question, what does it mean to be an American? And there's a tremendous public service in reminding us that we are composed of stories like this one. Last but not least, we're honored to be a part of this project because it so powerfully exemplifies the work and the mission of the National Endowment for the Humanities. This is the third in a series of 4 films that are being made about ethnic groups in the United States. Jewish Americans came out in 2008, Latino Americans in 2013, and still to come, an equivalent treatment of Asian Americans. And all of these stand, I think, for the critically important work of the National Endowment for the Humanities in reminding us of where we're from and the many stories that we come from. We are, in many ways, I think, a guardian of the cultural memory and legacy of this country. That's important in itself, but it's also important because it's such an important context for contemporary discussions. And lest we're tempted to forget where we come from, this film and works like it remind us of that, and they also remind us of the task of continuing to understand the story of the United States of America that continues to evolve. So I want to thank again John Maggio and Jeff Bieber for the opportunity they gave the National Endowment for the Humanities to be associated with this great and impressive work. And I want to thank all of you for coming tonight. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jeff Bieber. I'm the executive producer of the film. I want to thank Stefano. Thank you for hosting us for this evening. It's fantastic. This is a really special night. It's the culmination of 6 years that started with an idea and an email that I wrote to John Maggio on December 27th, 2007. It starts, "Dear John, I'm sure that you've never been approached to work on a project because of your heritage. However, I want to find just the right producer, director, and writer to develop and produce this project. Of course," I said, "one doesn't have to be an Italian-American per se, but I believe that one's background can make a difference in understanding the subtleties and nuances of telling these types of stories. And thank God I hired John Maggio to tell these stories. Little did I know that back then, that working on this program would be a little bit like sitting at the kitchen table back in Queens where I grew up, listening to my mother and father tell me about what life was all about. You know, Jews and Italians from Queens are a lot alike, but I'm sure glad that I picked an amazing Italian-American like John Maggio and his team at ARC Media, all over there, to produce this 4-hour film. In addition, we have an amazing companion book by Maria Laurino, my friend who wrote an amazing book, and a robust community engagement and communications campaigns by my colleagues at WETA, DKC Public Relations, and our partners at the National Italian-American Foundation, led by its president, John Viola, and by its board, John Calvelli over there. This could never have happened without the support and leadership of Pat Harrison and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, by our colleagues at PBS, to the National Endowment for the Humanities, that not just funds us, but really pushes us to create smart and engaging documentaries. From the Arthur Vining Davis Foundations, and a special thanks and shout out to Del Grosso Foods, our sole corporate sponsor, and our partnership at Channel 13. Thank you very much for hosting us here tonight. I have the honor and privilege to introduce someone whose life represents the best of the Italian-American narrative: hard work, family, tradition, and leadership. Since graduating from this university, Bill de Blasio has devoted his life to public service. And it's a pleasure that he joins us tonight. Please join me in welcoming the mayor of my hometown, the great city of New York, the Honorable Bill de Blasio.
It is a great, great pleasure to be here for so many reasons, and I'm thrilled that so many people are here to be a part of this tonight. For me, first of all, anything that celebrates our heritage, which has given so much to us and framed our lives here in this country, anything that focuses on that, makes us feel it and think about it more, is worthy. This is a particularly powerful project, which has already, I can tell from everyone I've known who's been a part of it, already touched people very deeply, and I think it's going to strike a powerful chord and spur a great conversation. So I'm thrilled for that reason. I'm thrilled also to be here at NYU, at my alma mater, in this beautiful new facility. When I was here, it was not a beautiful new facility. It was a grungy old facility, but we liked it just fine. We did well with it. And NYU, for me, was a place that really fostered a deep examination of identity. Because NYU was a school then, I think in large part it still is now, that was a place so many young people came to who were children of immigrants and grandchildren of immigrants, and who, in many cases, were the first going to college in their family. And it was a place where people were really exploring what their identity meant and playing it out in terms of their journey in this country. So it's a thrill to be at NYU. I want to thank Stefano for the great work of Casa Italiana here. I want to thank everyone associated with this project. Jeff, thank you for the kind introduction and for all you did to make this project come to fruition. I want to thank everyone, all the networks who are involved, PBS and WNET and WETA and everyone, all those who supported this and bringing it to fruition, because it's going to mean so much for so many people. It's a discussion we have not had enough. It's an exploration we haven't done enough of, and this is going to be very, very important. And in fact, will cause a lot of soul searching and good soul searching for a lot of people. So it's so important. I want to thank everyone who's been a part of it. A special thank you to my colleague of many years, over 20 years, Maria Laurino, who I knew long ago to be a great writer, but I also knew from the first conversations that we had, I knew she was someone who was exploring the meaning of our Italian roots very, very deeply, and had really put a lot of her life into sorting out what it meant, not just for her and her family, but for all of us. And Maria, thank you for bringing that soulful search to the written page and doing so much for this great project. Let's give her a round of applause. A lot of you joined us at Gracie Mansion when we celebrated Italian heritage, and I hope you will again. We're bringing a distinctly Italian flair to Gracie Mansion. Let me tell you, there's new attributes at Gracie Mansion. There's lots of red wine there now, except there's no offense to any Northern Italians in the room, but we have a rule that all the wine has to come from Rome or farther south. Okay, just a little. So. And I had, speaking of Rome and farther south, I had a extraordinary joy this past July to go back to my grandfather's hometown, Sant'Agata dei Goti, which is Provincia di Benevento near Naples, and my grandmother's hometown, Grassano, in Provincia di Matera in the region of Basilicata. And anytime you go to your forebearers' hometowns, it's an extraordinary experience. Our family is blessed to have kept a very strong connection to the towns that our family came from, so there was a special sense of things because I had been before to both towns, and there were family members who stayed connected to the towns, and so there was something great in the continuity of it. And then, oh, by the way, I was mayor of New York City, so they had a little bit extra celebration for that. It was pretty over the top, I must say, as you know. For all of us who share Italian heritage, there's kind of a little bit of an operatic quality to the way we do things, so it was pretty intense. But it was a beautiful, beautiful moment. Part of the beauty of it was to be able to see all this through the eyes of my wife, Shirlane, who, for someone who did not have the joy and privilege of being born with Italian heritage, has done a really good job of catching up. She is one of the great Italophiles you'll ever meet. But also, of course, through the eyes of my children, Chiara and Dante. And for them, of course, from very early on in their life, they were given a strong sense of their heritage. And Shirlane was so willing and so positive about doing that, to give them names that reflected their Italian heritage. And at the same time, we taught them deeply about their African-American heritage, their Caribbean heritage, their heritage in Africa. And it was something fascinating to watch them take in all these different pieces of who they were and not find a contradiction in it. They were challenged, of course, like any young people trying to sort out identity. And there's a special challenge when children are of different backgrounds, so they're multiracial, and I think that comes with certain questions. But what was beautiful about watching this with our children was they grew in the experience. They gained depth as they learned more and more about who they were and what it meant and what the previous generations had done. And yes, the struggles and the challenges and the discrimination they had to overcome, and what drove them, for those who came to America by immigration, what drove them, for those who didn't get to choose and found themselves in America, but had to seek something within that challenge, what drove them. Our children benefited greatly. And there are so many things I'd love to say tonight. I'll only say a few, but I think, like so many people in this room, this chance to think about who we are is so powerful. One thing I want to say is I strongly urge all the people in this room who I would consider among the true believers, because you care enough about your heritage, and you're thinking enough about your heritage to be here. To spread this simple notion that talking about it and thinking about it is powerful, and whenever humanly possible, for those who have the means, to go back to the hometown that your family comes from, and particularly to show members of your family who have not had that experience, is an amazing thing. It's a transcendent thing. I first went back to my grandfather's hometown when I was 15 years old, and I can affirm to you that my life was different from that moment on, that it gave me an entirely different understanding of not just who we were as a family, but who we are as Americans, all of us, because we come from somewhere, but also something life-affirming about the sweep of human history and the permanence of family and the fact there is something greater that undergirds who we are. So one thing I want to say is, please, this is a cause for me. It's so important if people have the opportunity to see their roots very specifically, to feel them more deeply, to demystify them, to show the next generation what it means, because we're at an interesting point in Italian-American history where the immigration has occurred, by and large. And now it's up to us to take the ideas and the messages and the meaning of the culture and maintain it and keep it fresh, even though there's not huge numbers of people coming in from our country of origin, to keep the meaning alive. And that's why what you're going to see tonight is so important, and the book is so important. But it's something we each have to do in our own way. And again, I can see through my own children's experience how much it has brought to them, and I have no doubt in my mind they will pass it on now. I have no doubt that all the things that my grandparents loved about their heritage, that they reveled in and they passed on so generously and with such passion to the next generation, that it just continues and continues. And it's continuing now very organically because it's deep-seated and it's real and it's meaningful. So one thing I want to say is how important it is to focus on that mission in every way we can. But the second thing I wanted to mention is that what I love about this project is it takes on stereotypes and misunderstandings that are so deep. And all of us here in America we could have a contest for who's been the most misunderstood or who's been the most stereotyped. And isn't it an interesting thing that a country that not long ago, just a few generations ago, didn't like probably any of us here in this room. It was not a great feeling for the vast majority of the peoples that now make up New York City. That country left us all with a question mark, because that was the governing cultural assumption. There was something questionable about people of different races than the majority, people of different religions and ethnic backgrounds or from different countries. There was questions attributed to all, stereotypes attributed to all. And it left people with an uneasiness. I could see it in my own mother. There was a beautiful picture of her earlier. I could see it in her. You know, my mother, her name, of course, Maria de Blasio, she, children of immigrants, grew up speaking Italian, learned English in school, classic American story. She was very, very successful by any measure. She went not just to college, she went to a great college, Smith College in Massachusetts. My grandfather, Giovanni, was, in his own very cosmopolitan way, willing to see her go off out of town to a college because he knew what it would mean for her and what it would allow her to do in her life. She had all the blessings of this country, and yet I could tell throughout the entire time I had the privilege to spend with her until she passed away in 2007, I could tell there was an uneasiness. There was something incomplete. There was a question mark. And from time to time in conversation, my mother would use a construct that gave everything away. She would say, in the middle of just any old conversation, she would say, you know, the Americans, and then continue the sentence. And here she was, as assimilated on the surface, as assimilated as anyone could be. But she really wasn't. There was something that didn't feel complete to her. There was something that she did not feel in the way of total acceptance. There was some yearning for what was and what she came from that was unanswered. It wasn't a negative, because for her, you know, her heritage, what the old country she came from, the new country she was a part of, all brought blessings and positives. But there was always a question. And it framed her thinking. And as was said earlier, looking at this question of how it frames our thinking, how it gives us hopes and gives us doubts, it all contributes to what America is now. For each and every one of us, Italian Americans and people of all other backgrounds, we all come with our great attributes, we all come with our questions, we all come with our struggle to assimilate, and it makes this country what it is. And some of those struggles and some of those challenges actually make this country better and stronger, no matter how counterintuitive that is. But the stereotyping and the negativity and the exclusion do not conform to our values, and yet we're fighting them to this day, even with Italian Americans. Theoretically, after a century or more, so much a part of the mainstream, we're fighting against those stereotypes to this day. So I want to thank, again, everyone who was a part of this project, everyone who came here tonight, and I will just emphasize what you heard earlier. You will do a great honor to the good work of these people. You will do a great honor to your heritage, to pass on the urgency, to let people know how important it is to see this, to talk about it, to think about it, and to pass on all we are to the next generation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I would like to invite the members of the panel to take the stage here next to me. Maria Laurino, Talese, and John Maggio. Please come. Well, first of all, congratulations to John Maggio, who is the writer and director of the documentary.
Can I point out my team?
Please do.
I'd like to point out my team who was with me the entire way. Muriel Sonens is down here in front. Muriel, please stand up. She's not Italian, but we've accepted her. Julia Marchesi, sitting right behind her. Seth Bomsey, editor, is back here somewhere. Seth, take a stand. And George O'Donnell. That's the key team. There are many, many other people, but I wanted to make sure that we all knew about them.
Thank you. Congratulations, John. And of course, Maria Laurino, that as you heard, is the author of the companion book to this series, The Italian Americans. We have devoted an evening to the presentation of Maria's book at Casa Italiana about a month ago, and I invite you to take a look at the video in which we talk expressly about the book, because it's a very illuminating experience, and especially invite you to read the book and buy the book. And of course, a great, very warm welcome to Gay Talese. And I would like to start with you, Mr. Talese. First of all, a legend in American literature, and to me, he's also the most elegant man, probably in the city of New York, but definitely in the US. And I understand that also your style in which you carry yourself is part of your heritage, and you talk about it in at least one of your books. And my question is personal, and it's actually reminiscent of a previous book by Maria Laurino entitled, Were You Always an Italian? So the question is, how did you come to discover your heritage, and how is that reflected in your writing?
You wish to be first? No, go ahead. All right, as the oldest, I'll be first. And indeed, old enough to have remembered, as your wonderful film evokes, John, I want to congratulate you so much for doing what brings us all such pride and a sense of history. And it's a sense of history that I lived through much of, because being born in 1932 and coming of age as a young man in the World War II years, and having a father born in Italy, trained as a tailor, very prideful in his craft, stitching with very determined fingers, always with a needle, never with a sewing machine, caring about craft more than the expediency of the machine. I learned through his example what pride one takes in work. But also, though, as he was the only member of his family to come to America, leaving 2 younger brothers and an older brother and a widowed mother in Calabria, and learning with the beginning of World War II and Italy being on the wrong side of that world, I learned as a troubled youth what it is like to be emotionally involved with 2 warring sides in a wartime. My father's younger brothers both fought in Mussolini's army against the invading Allies, the Allies that moved across North Africa into past Sicily and up into the very region where my family traces its ancestry, that little town in Calabria on the mountains near Catanzaro. And as a boy of 11 and 12 in this small town born in Ocean City, New Jersey, very few Italians in that town, very few Catholics, and those Catholics were hostile Irish, which made me feel that I didn't belong where I was born. And I think I hope to think I'm probably the last of the Italian-American experience who was very familiar with the term Dego and WAP because it was foisted upon me in my small Catholic parish, dominated by the Irish nuns and the priests, some of whom were born in Ireland. But I evoke this not-so-happy notion of my upbringing merely to bring to the present tense the fact that I'm a living memory of the dark ages of American-Italian experience on the small Jersey shore, somewhat south of Atlantic City. But I bring to my age, which is now 83, the memory of the triumphant years that followed. The war ended. The Italian nation was not looked upon so much in the 1950s as it had been in the 1940s as an adversarial country, affiliated with Nazi Germany and the specter of Mussolini as a very negative and laughable, overweight man that while he got the trains to run on time, he got nothing else to really go on time. And we Italians had had enough of him in our time. And I saw in the 1960s and 70s, as I came of age to come to work in New York and have a job in the New York Times, how Italians that I wrote about, including the Cuomo family and the DiMaggio family, the Sinatra family, as a reporter, as a chronicler with that paper record, I saw and met many of the people that John Maggio would illuminate with this great film that he's produced with Jeff Bieber and others that helped bring it to fruition as we see tonight. And so I am, in my very senior years, a very proud American of Italian extraction, and all of the good and bad that is reflected in this film. And I'm so happy that I lived long enough to see this film, because this is the first time I've actually seen a film that resonates with me as an accurate, passionate poem to the life we've all lived, all of us, sharing generation upon generation of memory. And I'm so happy to be here, and thank you for having me.
John, you have already received so many accolades for this film, but I think this is the most poetic one you've ever had so far, so you better make a note out of it. And the next question is for you, John. As we heard from Jeff, in his decision process of the person to whom entrust this project and having to do with your heritage, and you're already an accomplished documentary maker, but this is very, very close to home for you because you're an Italian American yourself. And I just want to know, in this process that lasted several years, what was the major discovery, the thing that you didn't know, that surprised you the most, that impressed you the most, and that got you more excited about this?
Yeah, it's a great question. I feel like there were lots of discoveries. There was the discovery of the lynching of 11 Italian Sicilians in New Orleans in 1896 I'd never heard about. There was the discovery of Arturo Giovannitti, a name I'd never heard growing up. Only to learn, he was this incredible poet, and really represented to me what Gay was talking about, with this sort of brought a kind of poetry and art to the labor movement in a way that I never really knew sort of existed. So it was a number of small discoveries like that, but what really struck me actually happened after I made the film, and I looked at it, and I actually watched all 4 hours, and I realized that there's an arc there. There's an incredible sort of the story of how one becomes an American. And to me, the real story here is it's kind of what gets lost in the bargain. All these small things along the way that add up, that make you an American, but also you have to, your culture gets pushed aside. Language. I mean, I wish to God I spoke Italian. I don't speak Italian. It was something.
You still have time.
I'm not, to speak it well. So it's things like that get lost for all ethnic groups, Irish, Jewish, Germans, everybody who comes here. Sort of, it's not so much a melting pot as it's a series of concessions. And how, in looking at it across the 4 hours now, I realize, like, it's okay now to go back. And we sort of talk about that in the film. What was once, disparaged, the peasant food is now, I always joke about, the gardoons and the burdocks that my dad picked out of the garden to eat, which were essentially weeds, to me are now $40 a plate at Babbo, And so we have in some weird way kind of come full circle. So for me, it wasn't necessarily one story, but it was the sum total of all the stories that we collected together that I realized, this was a whole narrative that I now fit into, that I didn't know existed before I started.
Thank you, John. Before I ask my question to Maria, since you see two microphones there, and we wanted to have a little Q&A about the film that you've seen, and maybe a question also to Mr. Talese and Maria, if you want to start lining up in front of the microphones, and then I'm going to alternate and give you the floor to ask your question, if possibly brief and concise and to the point, after you say your name. Maria, you wrote this really beautiful book, but it's not the first time you talk about issues of identities, and especially Italian-American identity, and coming to terms with it. And it's a book, as we said, that is a companion to the documentary. So it's not the script of the documentary, but it follows the same structure that, as you saw already from the clip that we saw, I remind you that we saw 45 minutes out of the 4 hours that you will be able to see on your TV on February 17th and 24th. So the idea of working on these themes, and what impressed me about your book and also about the documentary is that it really gives a sense of a great diversity within the Italian-American experience. And every time we do an Italian-American program, there is somebody in the audience that says, this is not my story. And I think it is great that somebody stands up and says that, because there is no way to represent all the stories that are so different. And in this book and in this film, there are the saints and the sinners, there are the socialists, the anarchists and the fascists, and there are the gangsters and the law enforcement. I think really the greatness of this project is that to account for the diversity that is the richness of the Italian community. And I'm very curious to know about the collaboration between you and John. How did you go about working on two projects that are connected and at the same time have beautiful separate lives?
Well, it was a great fun to do. I always say that I was nostalgic about the project as I was working on it, because I knew how nostalgic I was going to be once it was over. So it was really just a wonderful gift that John Maggio gave to me, that he had created this wonderful documentary and then asked if I could write the companion book. And John was also so much fun to work with, as the entire team of ARC, and they were so generous giving me their material. So I just kind of, dove in and then went deeper, which was the idea that even PBS in 4 hours is not, it doesn't give you the same amount that you can say in a book. So I looked into each of the stories more deeply, and then added also some characters, added some other chapters, the Italian-American counterculture, the beat poets, all of these great parts of the culture that we weren't, able to see in the documentary.
And Maria, a question to you as a woman writer. We saw, and also as somebody like you who has always been involved in politics, these are your two lives. You're a writer and somebody who has been very active and also worked in politics, as we also heard from the mayor. Two women, Geraldine Ferraro was the first vice presidential candidate in a major ticket, and Nancy Pelosi was the first woman Speaker of the House, the two of them being Italian Americans. One would think that there is no problem of emancipation for Italian women. They are the most advanced in their path to complete equality as anybody else. Is that true, or is that a misleading?
No, I think that's a little misleading. We had an event last week at GW that was really wonderful, and Nancy Pelosi was there. And she talked about what it was like to be the first Speaker of the House, and how she was both the first woman and the first Italian American, and how it was such an accomplishment to be both. because it's so difficult for Italian Americans to find a place for themselves in mainstream culture, and it has taken so long, and then to be a woman on top of that. What was so interesting for me about this whole process and thinking about this is, even at this table tonight, Gay is a second-generation Italian-American, I'm a third-generation Italian-American, John is a fourth-generation Italian-American, and we're all, in some ways, grappling with these same issues of identity and acceptance. And it's been a really long road, over 100 years after, our grandparents came here, our parents came here, that there's still been such a struggle. And in seeing that, and sort of seeing the course of the history and how tumultuous that history has been, has made it difficult, and of course, particularly difficult for women.
Mr. Talese, another question for you. Since you, of course, you're a very accomplished writer, but as you remember, you were a reporter for the New York Times, and you covered some of these great Italian Americans. Regarding the political allegiances of the Italian Americans, we heard the story of Giovannitti, the leaders of the strike, and then there is a sort of general assumption that it went all the way to the right, and little by little, the Italian American community as a whole moved from a sort of more radical leftist tradition to more traditional conservative positions. Is that a fair assumption, or?
I believe that the conservatism that is fairly well documented within the Italian American community, no matter whether we're talking about northern cities or the other parts of the United States, I believe it traces its origins to the experience that I had in World War II as a young person. I believe my generation, the mid-20th century generation, were so insecure about our place in this country because, as I said, in my own family's situation, of my father having soldiers in a family wearing the wrong uniform. And I saw those photographs on my father's bureau in his bedroom, snapshots of these brothers in these foreign, funny-looking Italian uniforms. The epaulets were wrong. The star was wrong. I mean, the whole, as a tailor's son, I knew what uniforms looked like. And this was wrong. And I think so many of us of my age group didn't know how we could prove our belonging in America unless, if we were at draft age, we could join the army. And this was true of a lot of people that I knew who were, like me, of Italian origin. And I think that was one step, being a soldier in World War II for the United States at a time, as in many families, not only mine, there are many families where you had cousins and uncles who were on the other side in the Italian army. Then in the 1950s, when the war is over, I believe still wanting to be American, wanting to be accepted, was a very slow process of believing you were worthy. In my field as journalism, I didn't find many people in my generation who were journalists. I was the first generation in my family, as many, and you refer to it, John, in your film, who went to college. As told you, I come from my family with tailors. My uncles were tailors in Italy. But I went to college and I became a journalist. And this was in a way a perfect experience for a shy person who's very curious about who he is. And in journalism, I had the press card, the permission, more or less, to ask people questions. I could overcome my natural reticence about intruding and ask people about themselves, and in so doing, privately comparing them to me. How are they different from me? How do they think differently than I do? Do they have some doubt about who they are, as I sometimes was too willing to recognize I did? So a journalist allowed me to get outside my sense of insularity and I asked questions, and I met poor people and rich people and successful people and infamous people. I remember the first time I tried to interview Frank Costello, who was coming out of jail. It was 1962. And he, like my father, like me, are Calabrians. And I thought, and another time in one of my last years at the New York Times, I was covering the civil rights movement in Selma, Alabama, and I was also covering the Bonanno trial in federal courthouse in New York. This was in 1965, both those stories. In the Deep South, I went to college at the University of Alabama. I'm watching Dr. Martin Luther King and the other apostles in his movement striving for the Voting Rights Act. That was in 65. I covered that story. At the same time, I'm covering the indictment of Bill Bonanno and his father, Joe Bonanno, whose gang was centered in Brooklyn. And I'm talking in the courtroom during a recess to Bill Bonanno, who's the same age as I am, born in Palermo, but not so far from the Calabrian area of my father's birth and my identity in a way. And I'm wondering to myself, how different is his background? Bill Bonanno, born in Brooklyn, educated at the University of Arizona because his father had a house in Tucson. I am born in Ocean, New Jersey, but same age as Bill Bonanno. His father's the same age as my father, Joe Bonanno. And they both came to America in 1922. And how our paths were so different, and yet there was so much that I could identify with. And it seemed, I didn't achieve it right away, but it seemed that I should know his story, because in knowing Bill Bonanno's story as the son of a gangster, and a gangster himself, I will know about the dark side of the American experience from Italy, from Sicily. I will know about what made Mario Cuomo tentative, perhaps, in seeking the presidency. I will know about what it's like to be on the wrong side of the law. Of course, we have 2 justices of the Supreme Court now. But in those days, we were always on the side of lawlessness, at least the people who made the headlines. In those days, from World War II, when it was the fascists and Mussolini in Italy, and it was the gangsters in the United States who had Italian names, and there were certain bright lights, Maggio in a way, Sinatra in a serious way, because he was the champion. I think Sinatra, among all other ethnic people, fought hard for equal rights for all Americans, for Black Americans in his band, for Jewish people, they were all part of his group. Sinatra had a little League of Nations in his mind. And I thought he was a great champion. To me, he was, because in 1940s, his songs became accepted by the American Songbook, the American listener. I was one of them, listening to the radio, Lucky Strike Hit Parade. And Sinatra penetrated because his work as a singer was accepted by Americans of all personalities and colors. And I believe that he helped me a great deal to feeling there's a place in America for success of people who know what their jobs are, singing as he did. Helped me greatly. And I later wrote about him. Didn't get very far, as people know the story Frank Sinatra has a cold. But I didn't have to have Sinatra tell me about himself. I felt I knew him from my boyhood, listening to the radio in an apartment above a tailor shop where I was born and reared. And so I'm going on too long and perhaps wandering off the central theme, but I'm saying that being an American, I accepted at age 83, I think I belong here now, but it's been a long journey, and so it has been for so many older people. And so again, John, thank you for bringing it all to one film. And thank you, and sorry for talking so much. Thank you.
I see you're being kind of shy, and I'm wondering whether is there anybody who would like to ask a question or make a comment, please. If you could say your name.
I'll make a question. I'm Connie. Good evening. Thank you for organizing this. It was fantastic, the preview. Thank you. My grandparents are from Italy, from Como and Reggio Calabria. Good combination. Unfortunately, they immigrated to Argentina. So I was born in Argentina. And now I migrated to America because, as we all know, opportunities in my country are, well, we don't have any opportunities right now. So,
unless you become Pope.
Thank you. My question to all, what do you think is a challenge for people like me that are from Italy, born in another country, and now living in America?
John, do you want to take that question?
Yeah, if I had that answer.
Thank you.
No, it's funny because I came across a lot of, Italy is going through this brain drain, as they're calling it. There's a lot of immigration, a lot of young people now coming to this country that are very different than the immigrants, like Gay's father and others. They're educated. They have college degrees. They have advanced degrees. And I wanted to do something with to look at that community and see how because they really make a very clear distinction. And there's quite a number of them in New York. But I didn't really ever have the time. Had I had more time, I would have addressed it. But I think the challenges are still, in many ways, the same. I think the world is much smaller. I met a lot of young Italians in Italy who are anxious to come to this country because of opportunity. But they work in an industry now that there's such facility and there's such ease because of the internet and all sorts of things that you have such an advantage, not just educationally, but I think because the world is a smaller place. But still, you have to fit in. You still have all the baggage of the immigrant, and you still have to, I think that you have the advantage of there are things Italian that people love, right? I mean, we love Italian things. So I think depending on what industry you go in, you'll have a certain ease. But, it's interesting. Italy itself is going through its own kind of immigration crisis, not even just out, but it's become the gateway for Northern Africans and Middle Easterns coming in, and it's an issue that they're having to deal with now. So it's an interesting time. When I showed this film in Italy, it brought up all these issues that they're having, because in Italy, the citizenship rules are different. Even if you're born there, you don't automatically become a citizen. So it raises lots of issues. I don't know if I have any good answers for you, but you're certainly here at an interesting time.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, do you call yourself an Italian or an Italian-American?
Or an Argentine.
I say that I'm from Italy, but I was born in Argentina. And then now,
Great definition.
And then now I'm living in America forever.
It's complicated.
Thank you. Do we have other questions?
Thank you.
Please. Could say your name?
Hi, my name is Nick Accardi. I'm a Sicilian American, first generation, and I'm a restaurateur here in New York for over 25 years. And I remember reading Mr. Talese's book, The Fortunate Pilgrim, in 1986, and it resonated with me, as this movie's resonated with me, because my recent restaurant is an old Italian grocery store in New York, a very famous landmark called Manganaro's Grocery Store, for over 123 years, and the family finally retired, and we took it over and turned it into Tavola. And we still maintained a lot of its historical integrity and its traditions. So a lot of the same shelves are there. So the movie resonated with me with the idea of the shopkeeping element of, I grew up in my uncle's deli in Queens. It's a very old deli with porcelain refrigerators and hanging cheeses, and when Italian Americans were made fun of for eating olive oil and hard bread, when now in fact that's really what you should be eating. So I just wanted to say it was an honor to be in the presence of Mr. Talese and to see the movie that actually spoke about my heritage with such eloquence. And I was asked to write a book recently now, which I'm working on. And I was hoping that maybe Mr. Talese could help me with some advice.
I'm sure you could see
We'll talk about that later.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. Thank you. Yes.
My name is Gianluca Galletto, and I'm one of those Italians who came later, like been here, but now it's 20 years, so I'm also a citizen. And I seen like there's a flood of those people here, and I've seen sometimes a little bit of a clash, but even clash is a little bit of a harsh word, but like sometimes we meet with the Italian Americans, and at the beginning we don't understand each other, honestly. So you come here, you see Alfredo sauce, and say, what the hell is that, Or like the spaghetti and meatballs, and the garlic. Everybody thinks we eat so much garlic, and I don't understand why. But, and also, sometimes I'm Italian, but then you start speaking Italian, I speak Italian. And so, but I felt like that's my personal experience, that by learning, and what this movie also showed so much, like there's a piece of history here of Italians, like the Giovanniti, I never heard of them before, and the Generoso Pope, that it's almost like having a piece of my own heritage, that I grew up in Italy. And so what I'm trying, and then I go on to my question, I'm sorry, but it's really like, I'm really moved by this movie and by this documentary, and it's important that it's shown in Italy very well, because you touched on a very important problem, the immigration crisis. And the fact that you have a lot of Italians, born in Italy, but they're black, or some of the places, they're completely Italian, but they can't have citizens. And then you have people dying on the street of Sicily all the time. Is there anything that Italian American, now I feel an Italian American as well, can we teach, or not condescending, but teach to the Italians there and other countries how to deal with this? Because we were a nation of immigrants. We overcame, the Italian Americans overcame so many problems here then. And then instead, the reaction is xenophobic sometimes, or even worse.
Maria, do you want to take this question?
Well, it's very troubling that in Italy today, you have young men and women who are 18 years old who grew up in the country, who speak the language, and who are not considered citizens because their parents are not Italian. And I think that there is some things that we can teach Italy in this sense. We have many immigration problems, but I think in this wonderful experiment that this country has been, we have learned some things that would be important to share, especially this notion of if you're born in this country, and this is only being challenged now, which is very problematic, but if you're born in the country, you're an American citizen. So I think that it would be an interesting dialogue to have. And the Italian American has a very sort of interesting, tenuous relationship with Italy, which is all sort of part of the issue of identity. We see ourselves as so Italian because we grew up with the distinction that Mayor de Blasio was saying, where his mother was saying, that's what the Americans do. So we feel very deeply about that hyphen, that we are both Italian and we are American. And then we travel to Italy, and the Italians look at us and say, why do you think you're Italian? You're not Italian, you're completely American. You don't speak our language. As if that's the one divide, that if we don't speak the language, we're not part of the culture. So I think there's actually a very interesting dialogue that we can have over many issues of Italian-American identity and immigration with the Italian population.
Thank you, Maria. I just want to remind you that the film was shown on Italian TV, Rai Storia, in October, correct?
Yes.
And it was very well received. Hopefully, Rai will also send it in a major nationwide broadcast where much more people will have access to it. And I think that is really going to be very helpful to trigger a very useful debate that will partially answer to Gianluca Galletto's question. Yes.
My name is Gary Tomei. I don't think the United States or the Italian Americans have very much to teach the Italians about immigration, particularly if we look at the present situation where there is such discrimination against the Hispanics and the Hispanic immigration to this country. So I don't think we're a great example of embracing other communities. In the Italian-American experience, we were personas non gratas. We were discriminated against and continually discriminated against for years. But what struck me was a question that you made, was about why we're such a conservative group generally. And my experience has been that the problem, not the problem, but the situation, and as I've read, because most of us are from southern Italy. I'm a mixed breed. I have Neapolitan background, Calabrian background, and Tuscan background. So experienced the whole gamut. But the Italian Americans from southern Italy are much more, quote, religious, even though the Irish don't think we're Catholics at all, but much more religious and much more conservative, and much more, I would imagine, much more grateful for the opportunities that they had in this country than the Northerners were. So as a group, I think we've tended to be much more conservative. So, and what we have lost, what most Italian, I'll take that back because it's a generalization, but many Italian Americans that I know, that I grew up with, because I'm 78, I'm only a few years behind Gay. In my community, they did not understand the prejudice that we faced. They weren't aware of the 11 Italian Americans that were lynched in New Orleans. They did not know the history of our people here. So everything was looked upon as, I'm just extrapolating from my experience. They thought, I mean, talking about in my community, people felt like, well, this was the promised land. Everything that was done here was done right. And that, in my experience, on my terms, that's not true. I think that we suffered a lot more than most people will acknowledge and will understand. And it's because a lot of my companions, my friends, did not know the history of our experiences in this country. The strike in Lawrence, Massachusetts, the coal miners' strikes, the times when the movie about the strikes in West Virginia, when the Italians and the blacks were the scabs, they did not absorb the lessons.
Yes.
And appreciate that we have to move forward and not look back and not accept everything as, quote, American is good.
Thank you. I think the film is also providing an answer to some of the issues that you raised, providing an awareness of where we come from and what our history is. So thank you very much for your comment. And just to specify regarding what Maria Laurino said regarding the U.S. could possibly teach to Italy, she was referring in particular to the fact that somebody who is born in this country, no matter who his parents or her parents are, automatically becomes a citizen. Whereas in Italy, you can be born in Italy, but if your parents are not Italian, you do not become an Italian citizen. And we have this paradox now in Italy of having many kids that were born in Italy, were raised in Italy, the only language they speak is Italian, and they do not have citizenship of Italy. I think this is all we can have for this evening. Tomorrow morning at 8:30, I have to talk about Mother Cabrini, the gathering for a fundraising for the Cathedral of Milan, if you can believe it. So I think we had a great night. Once again, I'm very, very grateful to all the members of the panel. And I believe our last word is going to be from John Calvelli from NIAF, who is one of the major co-sponsors of this wonderful documentary. John, please.
Buonasera a tutti. I wanted to just, volevo dire una cosa in italiano. Quante persone parlano in italiano? So maybe we haven't lost the language yet, right? I am a second, third, and fourth generation Italian American. My great-great-grandfather came here and went back. My great-grandfather came here and died here, and then my father came here. So therefore, this movie for me resonated. And one of the things that it actually did was, once I saw the film and had been working with John, I actually went to Ancestry.com. It's a naked plug for Ancestry.com. And I did my DNA analysis, and I found out that as a Southern Italian from Calabria, I am actually 71% Italian, 10% Eastern European Jew, who knew, 14% from the Middle East, and 4% from Armenia, from the Caucasus. And it is a fascinating, and I've now gone and learned about the cryptocurrency Calabrese Jews. There were 10% of Calabria was Jewish at one point. And I share that because our immigrant story goes back thousands of years. And what John has been able to do, and Maria in her phenomenal book have been able to do, is give us this slice, this moment in time, this last 100 years. And I would ask each one of you to spend some time with your families, spend some time really absorbing what is being taught here. Because I, as Italian as I can be, I am active in the National Italian American Foundation. I see my colleague here from the Columbus Citizens Foundation, the Angelo Vivolo. We have been active. I did not know of my own heritage until my involvement in this film and started talking to my parents and realizing, yes, my grandfather was deemed an enemy alien during the war because he was an Italian citizen. He lived in America, he was an Italian, but he was automatically deemed an enemy alien. Go home and ask your mothers and your fathers and your grandparents, and you will find stories that will shock you. My father told me, oh, of course, during the war, there were Jews in our town. Mussolini had sent Jews to southern Italy, and they were actually interned in the town where my family's from. These are incredible stories that we do not know because I believe the gentleman before literally touched on it. We have not shared these stories, and I believe in the film you had a wonderful moment where one of the speakers said that. We have forgotten that oral tradition that has made us who we are. So what I ask of you, and I plead, join the Columbus Citizens Foundation, join the National Italian American Foundation. I will say to you, maybe don't do that. Hopefully you will. But connect and reconnect with your Italian American heritage. Learn from that experience, and I hope that what you saw here tonight will happen around every one of your tables on February 17th and 24th. That the conversation does not stop tonight, that we use this as a springboard per un rinascimento della nostra cultura. Thank you very much.